Liftoff of mission 41D, first flight of the orbiter Discovery, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Hey, welcome to the Health or High Water podcast. This is your host, Brett, here. Trip is eventually going to be here in like 5 seconds. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to our listeners we've had join our journey so far. We really appreciate you guys liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, all the stuff that you've done for us. We really appreciate it. Helps us a lot. Also, we want to do a few plugs. Thank you, number one, to Laguna's Coffee, who's been fantastic to us. Locally sourced, amazing coffee. We are actually drinking it right now. Some of us are drinking it right now. And it is a beautiful day on, what day is it today, Trip?
The 28th, I believe.
All right, the 28th.
27th.
Okay.
27th.
Well, I'm going to pass it over to Trip here. I want him to do an introduction here.
Hey guys, Trip here from Health or High Water. I was about to say my old podcast, Art Mart, but the reason being is because today's my 100th podcast.
Oh, is it really?
It is. I look back. Today's my 100th podcast. Thank you guys to the viewers, the subscribers, the likers. Make sure you guys are telling everybody. Every little bit helps. Check out Caulify Labs at ascentperformancetraining.com. Check out our blog at ascentperformancetraining.com/blog. Thank you to our close sponsors, You vs. You. Am I missing anything?
Nope, that's it.
Is that it? Okay. Yeah, we got a really great guest. Met Terry through Matchmaker FM, which happens to be the oddest name for a podcast matching company I've ever heard. Sounds like a dating app.
dating service, yes.
Yeah, sounds like a dating service. But Terry, I saw a little bit about your story, and just Brett and I had to have you on, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on. I think this is going to be fun.
This is going to be very fun, yeah. And for the people who can't see us, we're actually sitting outside with this beautiful weather, right? Could it get any better than this?
Oh, this is great. Welcome to Denver.
This is, yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, so on Health and High Water, we talk about a lot of stuff. I kind of want to go into a lot of things. Your background was super interesting, and I think, as I started to read more about, your story, there's a lot of things that interest me. So we're going to kind of touch on a little bit of it. I just want to go quick into the hostage negotiator stuff. All right, I want to touch on that. There's a lot of health stuff we're going to get into, but I heard you were a hostage negotiator. We talked a little bit about it. Can you just give me a rundown on just like an overview on, first of all, how you got into that? What was it like, and what did it teach you?
Yeah. So for those of your audience who don't understand how hostage negotiation is run, or how hostage situations are run on a SWAT team, there's usually two groups. There's the tactical team, which are the men and women with all the toys, and then there's the hostage negotiators. And we always used to joke with the tactical team that if we did our job right, you didn't get to use all your toys and things like that. So it operates like any organization within a law enforcement, a drug unit, a homicide unit. So when they had an opening, I put in for it. And there was a physical fitness test. There was a meeting with the psychologist. There was a meeting with the team. And it was an all or nothing thing. If one person on the team said, hey, we don't like Terry, you didn't make it. And I was fortunate enough to get on. And I'll never forget. So we trained sort of on the job. We had a psychologist that worked with us. And so we would do different scenarios. And they put me in a scenario, very simple, barricaded person with a hostage behind a locked door. I spent the entire time talking to the hostage, and they're like, you do understand this is hostage negotiation. We're trying to get the hostage out. You need to talk to the hostage taker. I'm like, okay, I got a lot to learn here and that. But it was great having the psychologist, because we learned in the debrief. We learned in the, did you ever think that this person might be schizophrenic and off their medication? Oh, no, that never occurred to me, and things like that. So it was an incredibly rewarding job, and I learned a lot about listening. I'll never forget, they gave us a formula right at the beginning. And the formula, if I can remember, it was 7, 38, 55. And it has to do with how we communicate with each other. So 7% are the words that we use. 38% is the tone of voice that we use with those words, and 55% of it is our body language. Am I talking to you, with the closed body position, or, I'm on my phone, I'm not paying attention, and things like that. And if you think about it as negotiators, we weren't in the room with the guy with the gun, so we didn't have that 55%. We only had what you were saying and how you were saying it, so that's how we had to figure things out, based certainly on what people were saying, but what they weren't saying and how they were saying it.
Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, how many have you gone through?
How many hostages?
Yeah, ballpark.
Oh, God. I did it for 4.5 years.
You're talking like 150?
Oh, yeah, 100.
Oh, 100?
Yeah, probably
100.
100 different call-ups, maybe a little more.
Wow, just the stakes too are so high. Like the stakes, right? Like you're feeling like that's like you feel responsible. Like, hey, my job is.
You do, and I would say we were very good. I mean, we had trained with the FBI's hostage negotiation team, so we were very good at what we did, which means about 90% of the time we were successful getting the person out safely.
Wow.
But about 10% of the time, the person would say, I mean, we would sometimes be negotiating with a homicide suspect.
Yeah.
And he knew he was caught. He knew he wasn't going anywhere. So it was like, well, if I come out, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison. Mm-hmm. So my decision is going to be I'm going to end my life. And while that's certainly always tragic, and I don't mean to sound callous, I never lost any sleep over it because I knew I did the very best I could to get the person out. I knew I had great training. And I worked with great people.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, you've got the gun, you're barricaded. It's really going to be your decision on how this is going to end.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so going to talk on that point a little bit too about being able to detach and understand. Hey, that was not my decision to make that. That was his or hers or whatnot, right?
Right.
And I think that I know I'm comparing apples to oranges here, but that's kind of what I feel like a lot of people from war come back to. They can't separate those two things, and that eats them up. How did you learn to separate those two emotions and be able to go home and sleep at night?
I think you've got to have something that grounds you. And for me, it was my faith and my family. And so, I don't care if we spent 10 hours in a negotiation, we always debriefed afterwards. There was always what went right, what went wrong, what could we do better the next time. And then it was, hey, let's go out for a drink. Let's go out. And I was always like, look, I love you guys. I'd die for you guys, but I'm going home. Because my family grounded me, being with them, being in a safe, happy, loving, nurturing environment was like, okay, this was a horrible situation today, but you know what? I'm with the people that love me and care about me, and that grounds me. And I also have a very strong faith life, and that also, it's like, look, God, I'm going to do the best I can, really, ultimately. Like I said, it was this person's decision, whether they ended their life, whether they came out, whether the tactical team had to go in and get them out, whatever it ended up being. And as a negotiator, I mean, the tactical team, those were my friends. I didn't want them to get hurt, so you tried to do everything you could to get that person out safely.
That's crazy, just thinking about that experience. Let's go into, so you went to a very, very cool college, the Citadel, and you played sports there as well, which is pretty impressive and cool. You played basketball at a D1 school, much less the Citadel. Very competitive basketball. What position were you?
I was a forward, and when our center got in trouble, I was a center, which was kind of different. I mean, I'm 6'8", but when you're going up against guys that are 6'11" and 7 feet, you're a little undermatched in that regard.
I would never think of 6'8" as like undermatched.
There's this interview the other day with I forget who it was, plays for the Giants, I believe. He was like, "Yeah, I had the choice to play professional basketball or football," and he's like, "I was technically short at 6'8". Playing basketball.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to that level of athletics, every inch matters. It's important. So you had that experience, good experience through that college.
Amazing experience looking back on it. I mean, the Citadel was a military college. It was, at the time, it's co-ed now. It was all male, and I went there to play basketball, and I mean, they shave your head. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. I came here to play basketball.
That's right. They shave your head.
Yeah,
military.
And it was like, and I'd had 3 knee surgeries in high school, and I was like, all right, this isn't for me. I was going to quit, and I really was. I was walking over. I was going to give up a free scholarship, a free ride to college. I was going to quit, and I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I got some mail. Maybe my girlfriend sent me a letter or something like that. So I went over and I checked, and I had a 7-page handwritten letter from my father, who basically said, pull your head out of your butt. You have an amazing opportunity here. You are so in your head. You are so in your way. You've called home 7 times and not once asked how your grandmothers are, how your girlfriend is, how your brothers are, and stuff like that. You're all about you. Get out of your way, because you can be successful at doing this. And I mean, by the time I finished the letter, I'm literally, I'm in the rafters, the nosebleed section of the field house with the coach's office 50 feet away. And I'm in tears, and it was like, okay, put on your big boy pants now. You got to do this. I mean, I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't emotionally intelligent enough to do it. You know, a lot of kids today take gap years, or no gap years when I was, when I was growing up. It was like, get out there and make it happen. And 4 years later, I was able to graduate.
That's incredible. Yeah, I always think back of I'm going to get scolded for this by people, I'm sure, but I always think back of I think men. There's we did an episode recently about men and I don't want to say we're getting soft, but I think back earlier times that our job was to just grit it, and stand up and, hey, listen, you're we all have feelings, but sometimes we have to stand up and do what we need to get done, whether we feel like it or not.
I think we are soft. I think as a society, we are soft.
Totally.
And we have safe spaces, and we have dogs that come in that we can pet, during finals and all that. I'm like, what? I mean, we had a huge urn of coffee in the Sally Port in our barracks, before final exams, and donuts. It was like, go study. It was like you either made it happen or you didn't. There was nobody.
Yeah.
But I think, you make a good point. We don't just, like when I got cancer, people were like, well, who do you blame? And I was like, what do you mean, who do I blame? It's like, well, you have to blame somebody. I mean, you guys have probably seen it. People start down the road toward a goal, and then they butt up against an impediment. Something gets in their way, and they can't get over it, around, or through it, so they quit. But they don't just quit. Now they got to blame somebody. I got to blame mom and dad. I got to blame my boss. I got to blame my station in life. Very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. And so people would ask, like, who do you blame? I'm like, I don't blame anybody. And then they would find out I have a faith life, and it would be like, well, you must blame God.
Yeah.
And I used to joke with them, like, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list, and said, Terry Tucker, cancer today. But I do believe God has given me the strength to get through 11.5-year now battle with cancer.
I want to go. I want to kind of go just a little bit into that and ask a few questions about that. I mentioned it before the podcast how great of a writer I think you are.
Thank you.
I love and I was reading the Rocky analogy. Rocky was one of my favorite movies too. I was like, he's drinking the eggs, and if he had a better breakfast, maybe he would have. He's putting on his old Nike, his old crappy,
Chuck Taylor's.
If he had the right running gear, he would get out there and run. And it just goes on and on about stuff. Oh, it's freezing cold out in Philadelphia. If it were warmer, and he had kind of taking that idea and thinking about what you went through. This was a 5-year period, where and for the listeners too, your book is out. What's the name of your book again?
Sustainable Excellence: The 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life.
Yes, the 10 Principles to leading your
uncommon and extraordinary life.
And extraordinary life. Go look that up. It's a fantastic book. There's a part in it where you go into 5-year period where it was struggling, and there's a lot of people who listen to our podcast who are struggling with addiction, over obesity, depression, all this stuff, and you kind of go into it. How did you get through some of that stuff? Was it the faith thing that really pulled you through it? I know there were times that were dark. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. When I was diagnosed, I have a rare form of melanoma, and most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, and it affects the melanin, the pigment in your skin. My type of melanoma has nothing to do with that. It's a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. Mine appeared on the bottom of the foot. And so when I was diagnosed, I was told this was a death sentence. It was like, we really don't have anything to offer you. If it's somewhere we can cut it out, we will cut it out. But other than that, we have nothing to offer you. And I thought, well, why can't I turn this into a life sentence, something positive, out of this? And the first thing they did is they put me on a drug called interferon just to try to help keep the disease from coming back. And that's the 5 years I think you're referring to, where I took a weekly injection of the interferon. It gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. And I really felt there was really kind of a sort of two lives. There was the life of I'm living, and then there's the life of I'm just not dying. And I really felt I was kind of in that not dying phase. I really wasn't living. And I did. There was a point in time where I was like, look, God, I'm not contributing anything. I'm not doing anything but sucking air and taking up space. And I am sick all the time. I was so sick of being sick. It's like, just take me out of this. I never thought about suicide, but I was just praying that it's like, look, if you want to take me, that's fine with me. I got no problem with it.
Yeah.
And obviously he didn't do that, but I think what he did was give me the strength, the courage, the fortitude to go on. And 11 and a half years later, I'm still here, and I'm not quite sure why, but I'm very thankful for it.
Oh, I think you're sure why, and I kind of want to transition into that actually. What do you feel? You've been through it. You've been through so much. You're probably one of the most positive, just like great energy people out there. What's your secret to that? How do people? Is it partly faith? Is it all faith? What is it?
I think it's certainly partly faith. It's partly my family, but it's something I think I learned when I was playing athletics. I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old, and I played all the way up till I was 21 when I graduated from college. And I think what you learn, or at least what I learned as part of team sports, and I think it'd be whatever team you're on, is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. So I made the decision early on that, you know what, I got this disease. I don't like it. It sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I don't like the cards I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. I don't know where this is. Well, I know where it's going to end, but I don't know when it's going to end. And I don't spend a lot of time worrying about dying. I had my leg amputated in 2020 in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And after that, my wife and I went to the cemetery, to the mortuary, and to the church, and we planned our funerals. And I look at that, and it's so funny because so many people were like, well, you kind of do this motivation thing, and you talk about motivation, you wrote a book about it. How could you possibly plan your funeral? And I kind of looked at him like, last time I checked, we're all going to die. Don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now.
That we know of.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sure there's a few people that are.
Yeah.
I'm not.
We're all going to die, but we're not all going to really live. So I spend much more time focusing on the living part of it.
That's so cool.
And not so much worrying about the dying
part. That's why we started this podcast. Those words are why we started this podcast. There's one thing we found is a lot of the people that we work with, and even people out in the community, are just not living. They're getting by. Their jobs are, they go to trudge through their jobs, and they're trying to find meaning in life. I think that's part of the reason why we wanted to have this podcast, is have these interesting conversations where people can find their own reason and their own purpose to, feel part of this whole experiment of, we're on the earth. Why not make it the best situation possible?
Absolutely.
And what I love about that too is, we talk a lot about longevity. Where does health and wellness fit in longevity? How do I increase my health and make sure that I can live healthily, happily all the way through my 80s, even your 90s or whatnot. So I absolutely love that. Try to learn how to live the right ways. I'm really glad you talked about the youth sports. We just did an episode actually on Tuesday, yesterday, about the lack of accessibility to youth sports. What you actually get out of youth sports. The ethics, the community. What are some things right now that you think that youth sports could really help us out if we started putting some government money in it, setting up programs? Because all three of us here have been have gotten something great from youth athletics.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing you got to do is get the parents out of the way.
Agreed.
As a high school basketball coach, and I mean, I love the kids, couldn't stand the parents. I used to say that I would have a parents meeting, and I used to tell the parents, like, look, none of you have even played in high school, let alone college. I said, I have much more experience. I know what I'm doing. Otherwise, you wouldn't have hired me.
Yeah.
If you don't come to my job and tell me how to do my thing, I won't come to your work and tell you how to be an accountant or a nurse or a doctor or anything like that. So I think that's the first thing, because I think, and you absolutely hit on it, team sports teaches you about winning. It teaches you about losing. It teaches you how to be a teammate. It teaches you how to support each other. It teaches you all kinds of things that you can't get from mom and dad. You can't even get from your family. Sure. And I think parents are so helicopterish That's not even a word, but I just made up a
Yeah,
word
no,
for
I
your
love
show.
it.
I love
You know,
it.
Our helicopterists, you know, oh, my kid can't do this, or my kid can't. It goes back to what we were talking about being soft. You know, let your kid be coached. I used to have a rule. It's like, look, if your kid says, I'm not getting enough playing time, and they go home and talk to mom and dad, mom, you know, well, I'll talk to the coach. Like, no. You get the kid to come and talk to me first.
100%.
If that is not acceptable to them, then I'll be happy to have a conversation with you. But I am not talking to you. You know, and I used to tell the parents, my practices are open to the parents. You can come, you can watch, you can see how your kid is performing. This isn't personal. I love your kids. I want them to get something out of this, but sometimes what you get out of it is, I'm just not good enough because I didn't put in the time. I didn't put in the effort. You know, that we used to say in basketball, and I'm sure it's true in any team sport, good players are made in the off season, good teams are made during the season. So if you didn't do anything in the off season, don't sit here and tell me, oh, coach, how come I'm not playing? Because you didn't do anything to get better. And that person did, and I'm going to play her instead of that person. And I'll give you one final story. We were in the middle of a game, and I turn to the bench, and I look at a player, and I point to her, and I said, go in for so-and-so. And she gives me the affirmative nod, and I turn back, and I'm watching the game, and out of the corner of my eye, I can see the scores table, and there's nobody there. So I turn back, and I look at her, and I'm like, get in the game for so-and-so. She gives me another, you know, shaking, good. And I'm watching the game, and again, out of the corner of my eye, nobody's at the scores table. Finally, I look at her like, get in the game. Now she's shaking me off like a big league pitcher. You know, like, no, not doing it. I don't like that. I don't like that sign. I don't like that sign. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? You don't want to play? So I bring her to me. Literally, game's going on right here. I put my hands on her shoulders like, what's wrong? All of a sudden, the tears start. Tears start down the cheeks. I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, I don't want to go in the game, coach. I'm like, I'm sorry. There are no uniform wearers on the team. If I need you in the game, you need to go in the game. You come to practice every day. You make yourself better. You make your teammates better. So I need you in the game. I said, why don't you want to go in the game? She said, coach, because my friends are in the stands and I'm afraid if I make a mistake, they'll make fun of me. I said, what about your responsibility to your teammates? What about your responsibility that you come here every day? Again, make them better. Don't you have a responsibility to them here right now at this time? I'm like, am I really having a psychology session in the middle of a basketball game, you know, going on 5 feet in front? Finally, I got her to go in the game. I said, look, I know you might make a mistake. That's okay. Just give me your best effort. And that's the kind of thing, it's the mental aspect of the game. I mean, when you get, you know, when you tried out for the Reds and things like that. I mean, when you get to that level, the difference in skill is not that great. You know, it's what it is up here. It's up in your head. I mean, when you get in high school, you go to college, everybody's bigger, everybody's faster. Everything improves as you move up. So what are you doing to improve? If you're not doing anything, and when I started with this team, they were cellar dwellers. They were losers. So I had to teach. I had to develop a. This is our program now. This is, the word is not coming to me right now. Culture. That's the word I want.
Yeah.
We need to develop a culture of winning, where you
Yes.
expect to win, not expect to lose. And I certainly, you know, I have 3 brothers. I have no sisters. Went to an all-male, all-boys Catholic high school, and I went to the Citadel when it was all guys. So now I'm coaching girls. So you can imagine.
It's a different.
Totally.
It's a completely different sport.
It totally. I mean, even when my wife and I, we have one child, a daughter. You know, I remember we went to the OBGYN. And it's like, do you want to know what sex it is? She's like, yeah, well, you can tell us. Well, you should buy pink. I was like, oh, no. You need to keep it in there until it's done. I have no idea how to handle a girl. So,
Oh my God, that is so funny. It's even the program I came out with is mindset. I had a kid, I had a dad and a son. I was doing lessons for the other day, and the son, when I turned my back, great player, he tossed himself a ball and roped it right at my head. He was playing around. He didn't know, and I yelled at him. I was like, hey. Don't do that. And to see the look on his dad's face being sad, his dad was so apologetic. I said, hey, don't worry about it. Yeah. I said, I'm going to discipline him. You don't even worry about it. I was like, why do you need to feel bad? You didn't do it. I was like, he's an extent. I'm like, no. Coach's job is to do that.
Right.
But go ahead.
I think it's because parents are trying to like step in and be the coach and be there, and it's not the right thing. You got to let your kids make their own mistakes, so they're never going to learn.
You do, and there's a great book out. I don't know if you guys have read it. It's called "Do Hard Things" by Steve Magnus. And Steve Magnus used to be the track and field coach at the University of Minnesota, and he talks a lot about how all these parents are, they're putting their kids in club teams. They're moving across the country to so their kid can play in a particular. He's like, don't do that. If your kid is good enough, if your kid is willing to work hard enough, has the work ethic, has the mental and emotional maturity to do this, they'll be found. Some coach will find them and things like that. Mm-hmm. But you trying to make them, are you doing it because they're living vicariously through you, or are you doing this because you want to give your kid an opportunity? Don't destroy the love your kid has for a sport because you're trying to get them to the next level. Statistically, it's almost impossible to play in college. I mean, very few people play in high school. Mm-hmm, but
sure.
to go to the next level, whether it's Division 1, 2, 3, NAI, whatever it is, it's almost impossible. So don't think that your kid is going to, statistically, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I want to caveat that by saying we love you, parents out there. You do a fantastic job of shuttling your kids to and from practice, but this is totally true. It's 100% true, and the world will be better off for the kids and the parents too. Watch them grow, let them flourish. Find a great coach. Yeah. Find a great coach and trust in that coach. If they're not a great coach, maybe make some other decisions and moves, but definitely gain that separation. So now, and as we have a nice performance food truck flying by.
Passing performance.
So what's life like? What's life like now for you? What do you got going on now? I know you're doing a lot of speaking events. What else is like motivating you right now?
I've been on a clinical trial drug for the last almost 3 years now. That has kept me alive. Like I said, it's a trial drug, so it's not available. The FDA has not approved it. It's not available for treatment of cancer. But the people that started on this drug with me are all dead. And so I'm here for a reason. I'm here, and again, it goes back to this is bigger than me. Probably not going to save my life, but maybe saves the life of somebody 5 years from now, 10 years from now, based on all the data the doctors glean from my blood tests, my scans, and things like that. So that's a big part of my life. I do that. I go to the hospital. I go to Anschutz every 3 weeks for an entire week, and I'm treated. So I'm really kind of off the air that week. I don't do anything. But the other weeks, I do these podcasts. I write my blog. I'm compiling another book based on my 4 truths and things like that. So I think you have to have a purpose. Mm-hmm. When I graduated from college, my father was dying of cancer, and he had end-stage breast cancer, which for a man back in the 1980s, they were like, we don't really know what to do for you, so go home and die. But he lived another 3.5 years, and I believe he did because he had a purpose in life. He was in real estate, and he worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, when it's my turn, I need to remember that. I need to have a purpose in life. I need to have something to do. Otherwise, I'm going to sit around and say, oh, woe is me. Cancer's terrible. This is lousy. And it's like, I can live with cancer, but I can't live with not knowing I don't have a purpose. So I've got to have this purpose in life, which is doing things like this with you guys. We're outside. We're in Denver. This is great. This is a great opportunity.
I just want to encapsulate what we got going on. First of all, we are in the midst of Denver. I know we have people listening all across the country and the world to our podcast, but we're in sunny Denver right now. We're outside our gym. You can hear the maintenance man. The life is happening around us right now. It almost kind of feels good to be part of it, and we're telling stories that we, meeting new friends and new people. And, you mentioned purpose. Have you ever heard the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl? Viktor Frankl. Yeah, that book.
Get a little loud over there.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. What were your thoughts on that book?
I loved it. I think I don't know if it's this exact line, but he talks about that we all have a moral responsibility to find our purpose in life and to live it. And so many people don't do that. So many people are like, what is my purpose? When I wrote my book, the book was really a culmination of 2 conversations I had. And one was with a former player that I had coached who had moved to Colorado with her fiance. And my wife and I had dinner with them one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. She got real quiet for a while. Then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Your life should be about finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. And if you think about it, I mean, you have unique gifts and talents. You have unique gifts and talents. I have unique gifts and talents. Find out what those things are and do stuff. Try stuff. You know, and I think we like to think of our lives as having a purpose. We use that word in the singular. And I found in my life, it's a plural. It's, you know, when I was young, it was sports. I ate, drank, and slept basketball. Then I got into law enforcement, felt that was my purpose at the time. And now that I'm probably coming to the end of my life, I think my purpose has changed again to put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world as I possibly can with whatever time I have left. So don't think that there's just one thing that you can do. I'm sure over the course of a lifetime, if you live long enough, there are many things that you can do and still feel purposeful.
That's one of the things, you know, as I was kind of going through your bio, you've changed careers how many times? Give me a number. 10 probably?
10. Yeah.
You've done 10, and they're completely different. These aren't even, they're just like, you've learned, if you're speaking to somebody young, somebody 20s, 30s, even 40s, is that something you would recommend? Like, hey, try different things, like find your talents.
Yeah, there's I can't remember the name of the book, but there's the editor of Entrepreneur Magazine, Jason Pfeiffer. I remember hearing a podcast with him. He talked about how when he got out of school, he went to work for a small town newspaper. And after that, he said, you know what, I want to be an editor. I want to be an editor of a magazine, newspaper, whatever. He said, so I went to work for a company where I learned a certain type of editing. And he said, as soon as I learned that, I quit. And I went to work for another company and learned a different type of editing. And then I quit that and I learned another type of editing. He said, you know, and I agree with him. So many people, you know, especially as you get into your 30s and things like that, you kind of feel like, well, is life passing me by? Am I not doing what I'm supposed to do? Should I be married? Should I have kids? Should I be? And then what people do is they're like, okay, I'm comfortable here. I'm going to stay here. But if you're comfortable, you're not growing. Yes. You're not getting outside those comfort zones and things like that. And I think that's what people do. They get comfortable. They say, I'm good, but they don't feel purposeful.
Well, I want to add something too. It's going to kind of put the youth sports and what we're talking about together. Is I don't think a lot of kids have that opportunity to find what they want to do. Their parents are like, when they get to college, like, hey, you're going to do accounting, you're going to do a business, you're going to do what have you, because it's going to make you money. And then I think you see a lot of these adult, or young adults, mid 20s, early 30s, not knowing what purpose even means. Because they've been told their entire life what they need to do, where they need to be, the helicopter parents, all the way through college, and then they're like, well, I'm miserable.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I experienced that. So my dad's father, my grandfather, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So he was in Chicago during Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed in the United States, during the Great Depression in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and when the gangs, Al Capone and those guys were shooting up the town. Yeah. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury, he was shot in the ankle. But my dad always remembered the stories. My dad was an infant at the time, of the knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. Now this was 1933. And so when I expressed an interest in going to law enforcement, my dad was, absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do. That's not what I felt my purpose was.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, my dad was dying of cancer when I graduated from college. So I had a choice. It was probably the biggest choice I ever had made, other than staying at the Citadel at that point as an adult. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and get into law enforcement, or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding that backstory, now my resume makes a little more sense. Yeah. I went into business and did what my dad wanted me to do, and then I sort of joke, I did what every good son did, waited till my father passed away and followed my own dreams. And I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to be getting into that line of work. I know I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than their counterparts. So.
How long were you in the force for?
10 years.
10 years, okay. What made you get out?
My wife's job. My wife has always been, the primary breadwinner, and when she married me, I was a suit and tie, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, hospital administrator, and we're living in Santa Barbara, and I saw an ad for, you take this class, you can apply to be a reserve police officer. You can imagine that discussion at dinner. It's like, hey, hon, I kind of like to do this. What do you think? And she was incredibly supportive, said, yes, go ahead and do it. And I did it. I got on with Santa Barbara. I'd work my regular job all night or all week. And then on Friday night, come home, put on my uniform, go to roll call, work all night, and come home Saturday morning. And she said, she'll tell you, she said, you would come home exhausted, but with this huge grin on your face, with this huge smile.
Oh, I
it's just
love
like,
that.
I knew then that that's what you want to do. And when we moved to Cincinnati, I'm like, I want to do this full time.
And that satisfaction is what keeps you going the next day. And funny story, my grandpa and my dad both owned Parks VA crane rental, which was really hard work. 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. at night, you're setting up cranes and what have you. And I told my dad I wanted to do it because Grandpa did it. He did it. I was like, I want to do it too. And he immediately, nope. He's like, you're not working construction.
Really?
You're not going to do it. He's like, I'm miserable every day. And it was the first time I ever heard him be emotional about work or even talk about work ever. And I was like, maybe I should look around. And I'm glad we had that conversation about that, because I do think parents and the youth should be having these conversations about what do you want and what's plausible, what we can do, instead of just shooting someone down and be like, nope, this is what you're doing.
Well, you've got so many kids that go to college and get majors that will do nothing for you and go incredibly in debt for it. I mean, I've got my goddaughter went to Marquette University in Milwaukee, got a elementary school teaching, elementary education degree. She's $109,000 in debt.
Woo. Yeah.
And it's like, that was not smart. That was not a good thing to do for you. And she's going to pay for that for the rest of her life. Because, I mean, elementary school teachers, you're making $40,000 a year. How are you going to pay that off?
It's tough. It's impossible. Did I tell you I lived right near Marquette?
No.
Yeah. 15 years, right next to Marquette.
Nice.
Yeah. Great school, but that's a tough,
I know.
That's a tough decision to make. Oh, okay. So like now, you've been writing a lot of blogs, and is that sort of like? Is that where it kind of gives you passion to right now? And what's coming out? Like, people listening to this podcast, I guarantee are going to be looking at, that the books you mentioned and some of the stuff we mentioned. First of all, where can they find your blogs at? Where can people find you?
So I have this blog called Motivational Check, and that goes back to my police days. And I put up a thought for the day every day. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message. I have my book is called Sustainable Excellence. I have a Sustainable Excellence Extra that I put up on Tuesday and things like that. So I enjoy the writing. I have this great big notebook. And when I find stories, when I find lessons, messages, I write them down in the notebook. And that's what I use as sort of inspiration to, okay, what am I going to write about today? Or what am I going to write about this week? Because this moved me in some way. So motivationalcheck.com will get you to that. And it'll also get you to me. You can leave me a message in that.
I love that. If you were to have one thing to leave, like a mission or a purpose on this world, you mentioned how finite our lives are here. I feel the same way, that I don't fear death whatsoever, because I fear not living, right? That's how I feel. I fear that heaven and hell are right here on earth, and we create it with ourselves. And I know a lot of the things you've said have spoke that. If you could leave something like a legacy, what would that be?
I think, I have nobody's going to name a street after me or a basketball court or anything like that. I mean, that's not going to happen. I think my legacy, at least for me, is the connections, is who I've talked to, who I've met, who I've connected with. I got an email about a month ago from somebody who said, I just listened to your podcast and it was great and it really resonated with me. Yeah. And I said, great. I said, what podcast was that? And he told me, and I'm like, gosh, I don't remember that podcast at all. And it was a podcast I did like 2.5 years ago that he found that made a difference in his life. Let me leave you with a story. I had a nurse recently ask me, I had my foot amputated in 2018, had my leg amputated in 2020. And my nurse asked me, she's like, what was it like, to lose body parts and things like that? It certainly hasn't been easy. I'm 6 foot 8 inches tall when I actually stand up, when I'm not in this wheelchair. So falling, not an option, when you're 6 foot 8. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind. It can't touch my heart. It can't touch my mind, or my heart. It can't touch my soul. And that's who you are. That's who I am. That's who everybody's listening to us. And we spend so much time working on this body. And I'm not telling you not to. I mean, yes, you should go to the gym. You should eat right. You should get enough rest. You should reduce stress. You absolutely should. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little more time working on who you are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. As you said, this body's going to die. It's going to decay. It's going to go away. But our heart, our minds, and our souls, those things are eternal. Those things live on, and I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them as we should.
Man, yeah, you know when you were the whole what you just said kind of reminded me of a quote from an old hip hop rapper, Tupac Shakur. He's like, I may not change the world, but I'm going to inspire the person who will.
Yeah.
Right, and it's like I'm just thinking of like all the places you've been in your life and all the people, and I don't know if we said it on the podcast today or if it was before the podcast, but you mentioned you've done minimum 700 podcasts, easy. I'm just picturing how many listeners have listened to that, and your story's incredible. You've triumphed cancer, and you've stared it in the face and continued, and you have the most positive attitude I've ever seen. I mean, I'm grateful to sit here with you. If you guys want to find more out about Terry, you can check out his book online. You can check out his blogs, are all on there. And every single day you're putting out new material.
That's right.
Every day. So, and they're okay to message you, to reach out to you. Is that okay?
I'd love that. Yo,
okay.
I love talking to people.
Yeah, I can tell you're real shy.
I am.
You're a real shy individual. Yeah, I know your schedule is going to be crazy just doing all your stuff and stuff. I would love to have you back sometime again and do this again and brew another fresh pot of coffee.
I would love that.
Yeah, and tell the story. So once again, guys, you've been listening to Terry, myself, Brett, here, and Trip from Ascend Performance Training on Health or High Water podcast. I want to say thank you so much. We appreciate you guys very much. We're going to try to bring to you these great conversations with awesome people like Terry. I want to thank you all of our sponsors, Kalevala Labs and Laguna's Coffee and O2 Boost and Gene Planet. Thank you so much for supporting us, you guys. We really appreciate you and the listeners. So be well, have yourself a great day, and we'll catch you on next time on the next episode of Health or High Water podcast.